a quiet black girl walks into Brooklyn. Hi, she's here to finish her senior year and stay unnoticed, but before she can even make it through the first week, a white girl in her class decides she's the perfect target. The laughter starts. First, then the whispers, then the public humiliation, and when the bully smirks, convinced it's time for one final performance, the crowd gathers waiting for the inevitable, but there's something they don't know about the black girl. She's not just the new kid. She's a fighter trained to battle, and she's about to remind them all exactly what that means. The yellow school bus pulled up to the curb in front of Brooklyn High, its brakes hissing as the doors creaked open. Students spilled out laughing, shoving, moving in clusters that had long been established. No one paid attention to the girl stepping down last, her backpacks slung over one shoulder, her expression unreadable. Imani Brooks adjusted the strap of her bag and took a steady breath, scanning the towering brick building ahead of her. It wasn't much different from her old school in Chicago. Same crowded hallways, same noisy students, same unspoken rules of survival. Keep your head down, don't draw attention, and stay out of trouble. That had been her approach at every school before this one, and she intended to stick to it. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to finish her last year, get her diploma, and move on. As she walked through the entrance, she felt the usual sensation. Eyes on her, whispers exchanged in hushed tones. She knew how this worked. A new face always drew curiosity, but the scrutiny was different when you were a black girl in a predominantly white school. They weren't just looking at her. They were assessing her. What kind of person was she? Would she be loud? Would she be aggressive? Would she be one of those girls? Imani ignored them, keeping her gaze ahead as she navigated the hallway, searching for her locker. That was when she saw them. Jessica Carter. The name had already been murmured around her on the bus, the way students glanced at the tall blonde girl with a mix of admiration and caution. She wasn't just popular, she was in control, the kind of girl who dictated the social hierarchy, deciding who mattered and who didn't. And she never moved alone. Flanking her were Monica and Ava, her loyal shadows. But what really caught Imani's attention were the two boys standing with them. Ryan Carter, Jessica's older brother, a senior and the school star football player, broad-shouldered with a cocky smirk that said he knew he was untouchable. Next to him was Trey Morales, a wiry, sharp-eyed boy with an easy grin, the kind of guy who ran his mouth just because he liked the sound of his own voice. Imani knew the type. She had no intention of getting involved with any of them, so she turned back to her locker, twirling the dial on the combination lock. But even as she kept her head down, she could feel it, Jessica's gaze lingering on her, calculating the first. Class passed uneventfully, though the whispers continued. Someone nudged her in the hallway, murmuring, "She's from Chicago, thinks she's one of those tough girls." Imani didn't react, let them think whatever they wanted. At lunch, she found an empty table in the corner of the cafeteria and sat alone, eating in silence. The hum of conversation and laughter filled the air, but she didn't engage, didn't even look up until the laughter changed. It was louder now, sharper, targeted. She felt them before. She heard them. Well, look at this. Jessica's voice rang out smooth and dripping with amusement. Imani didn't react, calmly taking a sip of her juice. "Oh, is the new girl shy?" Monica chimed in. "I think she's just stuck up," Ava added, acting like she's too good to talk to people. The cafeteria was listening. Now the show had begun. Imani continued, eating, giving them nothing. Then a new voice joined in. "Trey, maybe she doesn't speak English." He mocked, smirking. Laughter rippled around them. Ryan leaned against the table next to hers, looming over her, or maybe he drawled, "She's just slow." More laughter. Jessica smirked, watching Imani closely. She wanted a reaction. She needed one, because if the new girl just ignored them, that was a problem. If you ignored Jessica Carter, that meant you weren't afraid of her. She reached forward and flicked him juice, cup, knocking it over onto her tray. The drink spilled across the table, soaking her food. The cafeteria went silent for a moment. Imani exhaled slowly. She set her fork down, wiped her hand with a napkin, and calmly stood up without sparing Jessica or her crew. A glance, she picked up her tray, walked over to the trash, and dropped it in without a word. Then she laughed behind her. Laughter erupted again, but it wasn't as loud this time. It was forced, uneasy, and Jessica felt it, too, because when Imani looked at her before walking away, there was something in her eyes, something cold. Not anger, not fear, just a quiet, dangerous patience. And for the first time in a long time, Jessica Carter felt something she wasn't used to feeling: uncertainty. The tension from the cafeteria lingered long after Imani left, spreading through the school like wildfire. By the next period, people were already whispering about it in the hallways, retelling the moment when she simply walked away untouched, unaffected. It should have been a victory. For Jessica, another new kid, humiliated into submission, but something about the way Imani had handled it didn't sit right. She hadn't looked embarrassed. She hadn't even looked angry. It was almost like she had been waiting for it to happen. Jessica hated that feeling, the feeling of not being in control sitting. In her next class, she drummed her manicured nails against her desk barely, listening as the teacher lectured next. To her, Monica leaned in and whispered, "That was kind of weird, wasn't it?" Jessica's eyes flicked toward her weird. How Monica hesitated, she didn't react. Most people, especially new kids they at least look pissed or scared or something. She just didn't care she's faking. Jessica said, forcing a smile she wants. "To look tough." Monica nodded. But Jessica saw the uncertainty in her expression. She wasn't the only one thinking it, the whole cafeteria had felt it. And now, instead of laughing about how pathetic the new girl was, people were curious. About her, Jessica's jaw clenched. That wasn't how this worked across the room. 2 seats down, Ryan stretched his arms, behind his head flashing a lazy grin. "You looked stressed," sis Jessica shot him a sharp look. "Shut up." Ryan chuckled, amused. "Relax if she wants to act like a badass. We'll just push harder. She'll break." Trey, who had been lounging behind them, smirked. "Yeah, maybe we need to turn up the heat a little." Jessica let their words settle. Maybe they were right. Imani was just another girl trying to act tough, and if she thought she could walk around here like she was untouchable, she had another thing coming. By the next day, the pressure started to build. Imani could feel it before she even got to school, the way people looked at her differently now, how the energy had shifted. She was no longer just the new kid now, she was a challenge. She didn't react, she didn't need to walking. To her locker that morning, she moved with the same calm, unbothered demeanor. She always did, but that didn't stop the whispers. She really just walked away. She didn't even look mad. What if she's actually dangerous? The rumors spread faster than wildfire, and it wasn't long before Jessica and her crew decided to test her again. It started small. During gym class, Monica and Ava made sure to accidentally bump into her whenever they passed. A sneaky elbow here, a careless shove there. Imani didn't react, that only encouraged them. During basketball, Ryan made sure to take the ball from her every time she got it, shoving into her hard enough to make her stumble. Trey laughed every time it happened. "Damn new girl, do you even know how to play?" Imani ignored them. Jessica watched, arms crossed, waiting, wanting to see something in Imani crack, but nothing. Imani took every shove, every insult, every unfair move, and didn't flinch. If anything, she looked bored. It wasn't submission, it was control. Jessica gritted her teeth. That was worse. By the time lunch rolled around, Jessica was done playing games. Imani had barely picked up her tray when she felt it, a sudden heavy shove from behind. She stumbled forward, her tray tipping, food splattering across the floor. The entire cafeteria went silent. For a moment, there was nothing but the echo of the tray hitting the ground. Then the laughter started. Jessica's smirk widened as she stepped forward, standing over Imani like she was already victorious. "Oh no," she said mockingly. "Did the poor little new girl drop her lunch? That's so sad." Eva and Monica were laughing. Ryan leaned against a nearby table, arms crossed, a smirk on his face. Trey had his phone out recording. Students pulled out their own phones, cameras flashing. This was it. This was the moment Imani was supposed to break. Jessica leaned in. "What's wrong? Going to cry? Maybe you should run home to mommy." More laughter, more cameras, but Imani didn't move. She stood completely still for a second, her fists clenched at her sides. Her breathing remained steady. Then slowly she looked up at Jessica and she smiled. It was small, almost imperceptible, but Jessica saw it. For the first time, Jessica felt something cold crawl up her spine. The cafeteria was still laughing, but Jessica suddenly wasn't sure why. It didn't feel like she was winning anymore. Imani bent down, calmly picked up her tray, and without breaking eye contact, turned and walked away. Laughter exploded again, but it wasn't the same this time. Jessica could hear the confusion beneath it, the way people were whispering even as they laughed. That wasn't fear in Imani's eyes, it wasn't anger, it was something else entirely. And for the first time in her life, Jessica Carter felt doubt that night. Imani sat at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched plate of food. In front of her, her father, Darius Brooks, stood at the counter pouring himself a cup of coffee, his sharp eyes flicking toward her every so often. He didn't need to ask if something was wrong. He had seen that expression before, the quiet, measured stillness of someone holding something back. He set his cup down, leaning against the counter with arms crossed. "All right," he said, voice steady. "Tell me." Imani exhaled through her nose, still replaying the cafeteria scene in her head, the food dripping off her tray, the laughter, the smug look on Jessica's face. "I don't want to fight," she said finally. Darius studied her for a long moment before speaking. "And yet, you're thinking about it." Imani's fingers curled into fists on the table. "I don't want to fight," she repeated, voice tighter this time. "But I don't want to be that girl either, the one who just takes it, the one they think they can push around." "I walked away today, and I swear it made things worse." Darius took a slow sip of coffee, considering his words carefully. "You walked away because you didn't want to hurt them." Imani looked up sharply. He met her gaze. Unblinking, I trained you to defend yourself, not to be a weapon, but I also trained you to recognize when people like that don't stop until you give them a reason to. She swallowed, feeling the weight of those words. She knew that truth all too well. She had grown up in a cage fighting gym surrounded by men and women who lived by discipline, by control. Her father had been a professional fighter. Before leaving the ring to train others, she had been sparring with grown men. Since she was 8, her footwork, her instincts, her ability to anticipate an opponent's next move all drilled into her since childhood. But that power had consequences. The last time she had fought back, really fought back, it had landed a boy in the hospital. It had ruined her life. A new school, a new city, a promise to herself that she wouldn't let that side of her out again. She took a slow breath. If I fight back, it won't end there, she murmured. It never does. Darius nodded. That's true. But walking away doesn't always end it either. If they think you're weak, they'll keep pushing until they break you. She met his gaze, her voice quieter now. So what do I do? Darius set his cup down and walked toward her, pulling out the chair across from hers. He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table, his tone calm but firm. You don't start fights, Imani, but you finish them. She held his gaze. You don't need to prove anything to them. But if they leave you no choice, you make sure they never try it again. She exhaled, slowly, the tension in her chest loosening just slightly. Darius sat back. I know you. I know your control. You're not some wild kid throwing fists because you're angry. You make decisions. You calculate. A pause. Then he added, so if you have to fight, don't do it to teach them a lesson. He met her gaze again. Steady, unshakable. Do it to end the fight. Before it even begins, Imi sat there, absorbing his words, letting them settle into her bones. She wasn't looking for a fight, but she knew now the fight was looking for her, and when it came, she would be ready. Jessica Carter couldn't sleep at that night. She replayed the cafeteria scene in her head over and over, but no matter how she tried to twist it, she couldn't ignore what had happened. Imani had smiled. Not flinched, not cowered, not even looked annoyed, just smiled. It wasn't right, it wasn't normal, and it wasn't over. Lying in bed staring at the ceiling, Jessica clenched her fists. People had laughed at him, sure, but something was off about the way they had talked about it afterward. The whispers in the hallways had changed. People weren't making fun of the new girl anymore. They were talking about her. Some of them even seemed impressed. Jessica's stomach twisted at the thought. No, she wasn't going to let some random transfer. Nobody mess with the order of things. Tomorrow she would end this for good. By the time morning came, the plan was already set. Ryan, Trey, Monica, Ava, they were all on board. This wasn't just about proving a point anymore. This was about making sure Imani knew her place the moment the final bell rang. Jessica made sure word spread fast. By lunch, everyone knew. After school, behind the gym, no teachers, no cameras, just a lesson in humility. Imani knew too. She had felt the shift the moment she walked into the building. The way people watched her differently now, some with curiosity, some with excitement, some with pity. She wasn't stupid. She had been through this before. Different faces, different schools, same patterns. She had spent years avoiding these moments, staying quiet, keeping her head down, making sure she never had to be that person again. But people like Jessica never understood silence. They thought it meant weakness. And Imani was done pretending. When the final bell rang, she didn't hesitate. She walked toward the back of the school, stepping into the open lot behind the gym where the cracked pavement stretched out under the dimming sky. They were already waiting. Jessica stood in the center, arms crossed, her expression smug. Monica and Ava flanked her like always, but this time Ryan and Trey were there, two standing just a little closer than necessary. Their presence, an unspoken warning, and behind them an audience word had spread faster than Jessica had expected. At least 20 students had gathered in a loose circle, some whispering, some holding up their phones, waiting for the show to begin. Imani didn't react. She kept walking slow, steady, controlled, stopping just a few feet from Jessica. Jessica tilted her head. Wow, you actually showed up. Thought you'd just keep running like yesterday. Imani didn't blink. I wasn't running, Jessica scoffed. Please, you didn't even try to stand up for yourself. Imani exhaled, tilting her head slightly, like she was bored. You think throwing food on someone is a fight? Jessica's smile twitched. She hated how calm Imani sounded. Oh, don't worry, she said sweetly. I plan to make it a real one. She took a step closer, and Imani finally spoke the words that made the air go still. I'm here to warn you. Jessica blinked, caught off guard. Warn me. Ryan and Trey exchanged glances. Monica and Ava looked confused. Imani's voice was steady, even like she was stating a fact. You don't want to do this, Jessica laughed, but there was a flicker of something sharp and uncertain in her expression. Oh, that's adorable. The new girl is threatening me. Imani didn't move. Not a threat, a warning. Jessica hated that she felt her own heartbeat a little harder, hated that Imani wasn't scared, hated that she was starting to feel like she was the one making a mistake. Ryan, sensing the tension, stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. You done talking, or are we going to start this? And just like that, Jessica had an auto way to save face if Emily wasn't scared. Of her fine, she'd let Ryan handle it. Jessica smirked. You heard her, right? She says we don't want to do this, so why? Don't you show her just how wrong she is? Ryan rolled his shoulders, stepping up to Imani. He towered over her, at least 6 in taller, built like a brick wall, grinning like this was nothing more than a joke. Go easy on you, he said mockingly. Imani didn't answer. Ryan swung first. It happened in an instant the moment his fist moved. Imani wasn't there anymore. She stepped inside his reach, grabbed his wrist with one hand, and in a single, fluid motion twisted and used his own momentum against him. Ryan's world flipped upside down one second. He was throwing a punch the next. His back slammed against the pavement so hard. The breath rushed out of his lungs. The crowd gasped. Jessica's stomach dropped. Ryan lay on the ground, coughing, his eyes wide with confusion, with fear, because that wasn't supposed to happen. That wasn't possible. Imani stepped back, her face unreadable. I warned you, Trey hesitated. His bravado wavered, his body tense, but he had a reputation to keep. He couldn't back down, not in front of everyone. Pitch got lucky. He spat, charging forward. Imani barely moved. She sidestepped at the last second. One smooth motion grabbed Trey's wrist mid-strike, spun behind him, and wrenched his arm back in a lock so fast he let out a strangled yell. She let him go. Trey stumbled forward, clutching his arm, staring at her like she was something else entirely. The crowd was silent now. Jessica felt her pulse pounding in her skull. She had lost control. Imani stood, their hands loose at her sides, completely calm, and when she finally looked at Jessica again, her voice was quiet, almost disappointed. Do you still think I was running? Jessica didn't answer. She couldn't, because for the first time in her life, she knew what it felt like to be the prey. For the first time in her life, Jessica Carter had nothing to say. The silence was deafening. The same crowd that had gathered to watch Imani be humiliated now stood, frozen, staring their wide-eyed disbelief, reflecting back at Jessica like a distorted mirror. Ryan was still on the ground, struggling to catch his breath. His pride shattered in front of everyone. Trey stood stiff, his arms still cradled against his chest, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like he was trying to physically hold in his humiliation. Monica and Ava, Jessica's faithful shadows, were eerily quiet, their usual smirks wiped clean off their faces, and Imani, she hadn't moved, she hadn't celebrated, hadn't mocked them, hadn't even looked satisfied. She just stood there, steady, her hands still calmly at her sides, like none of this had required any real effort. Jessica's nails dug into her palm. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. Her mind raced, scrambling for a way to fix this, to turn it back around. There had to be something, some way to regain control, to remind everyone that she was still Jessica Carter, still the one who made the rules in this school, still the one people feared. But then Imani spoke, and she made sure Jessica understood exactly how badly she had lost. You thought this was about power, Imani said, voice quiet, but somehow stronger than all the murmurs surrounding them. But the truth is, you were never strong to begin with. Jessica felt the words hit like a slap, burning through her skin, her pride, her very existence. And then Imani turned away. Just like that, she turned, leaving Jessica standing there, humiliated, in front of the same crowd that had once worshipped her. A movement so simple, so dismissive. Jessica snapped. She didn't plan, she just acted. Lunging forward, her hand grabbing for Imani's hair in a blind, desperate attempt to take back control. A mistake. Before Jessica could even register what happened, her wrist was caught midair, trapped in a grip that was like iron. Imani didn't even turn her head. She just held Jessica's arm there, effortlessly, her body completely still. Jessica froze, her breath catching in her throat, and then finally Imani turned to look at her. Jessica felt the full weight of that gaze, steady, unwavering, inescapable. Imani's grip tightened, slightly, not enough to hurt, but enough to make Jessica feel her own weakness. Imani leaned in just enough that only Jessica could hear when she spoke. You don't have any power over me, she said, and you never will. And then she let go. Jessica stumbled backward, her heart hammering violently against her ribs, her body betraying her in front of everyone. Imani didn't wait for a response. She just walked away. This time the silence wasn't just shock, it was final. Jessica knew it, and worse, everyone else did too. Ryan and Trey weren't smirking anymore. Monica and Ava weren't whispering in her ear. The crowd the same. People who had once hung on her every word were looking at her differently now, not with fear, with pity. Jessica couldn't breathe. She had lost not just a fight, she had lost everything. The next morning, Brooklyn High felt different. Jessica Carter walked through the halls, shoulders squared, chin lifted, her designer bag slung over her shoulder as if nothing had changed, but she could feel it. The shift, the weight pressing, against her the whispers that followed. Her wherever she went, she had spent years commanding this school controlling, the social order dictating who was important and who was invisible, but now she was the one being watched, not with admiration, not with fear, with doubt. And worse, with curiosity. It was Imani's name she heard murmured behind her as she passed, not hers. People weren't talking about Jessica's power anymore. They were talking about how the new girl had dismantled it in less than a week. At her usual table in the cafeteria, Jessica sat stiffly, barely touching her food. Monica and Ava were quieter than usual, avoiding eye contact, their loyalty. Suddenly uncertain, Ryan and Trace sat nearby, their bruised ego still fresh, but neither of them had anything to say. No, one did, because for the first time, Jessica wasn't the center of attention. Across the room, Imani sat alone, just like before she ate her lunch, calmly, unbothered, like nothing had happened, but something had. People kept sneaking glances her way. Some students whispered. Others just watched, hesitating near her table as if they were thinking about sitting with her. A few from the basketball team nodded in respect as they passed. Even some of the girls who never would have acknowledged her before now seemed intrigued, but Imani, she didn't care. She wasn't looking for attention. She wasn't trying to replace Jessica. She had done what she came to do, and now she was done. Jessica hated that. Most of all, that Imani hadn't just beaten her. She had moved on. No victory lap, no gloating, no desire to take Jessica's place at the top, because to Imani the throne never mattered. Jessica's fingers clenched around her fork. She could fix this. She had fixed worse before. Maybe if she got ahead of the narrative, maybe if she made Imani look bad, maybe a shadow fell across her table. Jessica looked up. Imani was standing there for a second. Jessica forgot how to breathe. Manny didn't sit. She didn't lower her voice. She just looked at Jessica, completely calm, completely in control. We're done, she said simply. Jessica's throat tightened. Everyone was listening. She could feel dozens of eyes locked onto them. Waiting, watching, holding their breath. The words felt like a sentence, a final verdict. Jessica had lost, and everyone knew it. Imani didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked away. Jessica sat there, frozen, her world crumbling around her as Imani stepped through the cafeteria doors and out into the hallway, leaving everything behind. And for the first time in her entire life, Jessica Carter had no control over anything at all. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.